Meeting to order. Is called the meeting of the Indiana Environmental Rules Board to order February 9th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. And I'm going to call the roll. And so if you all can just say present or something. Bill Etzler. Bill Etzler. Because I know he's going to be on. Ken Rulon, I think I saw Ken.
Present.
Michael Chambers. Michael Chambers. Bill Etzler just connected. Karen Balaquat. Is Karen on? You all will have to remember to unmute your mic. Chris Horn.
Present.
RT Green. Mr. Green. Dr. Nemec.
Yes, present.
Carrie, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce her last name. Kozerski. So is Karen on?
I'm here, yes.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Alexandrovich,
Present.
Cal Davidson,
Present.
Michael Schuler,
Present.
the proxy for Lieutenant Governor, Katie Nelson.
And this is Shelby Huff. I am filling in for Katie Nelson today as well.
Okay, thank you. The IDNR Executive Director, Dan Bortner.
Present.
IEDC proxy, Mark Waskey. And new commissioner, Brian Rockensus.
Present.
And I will take this opportunity to welcome Brian as a commissioner. As you all know, and it's certainly been since our last meeting, then Commissioner Pickett took a job with US EPA in Washington, and so he's not with us. And Brian is now the new commissioner, and from everybody I've talked to, he's doing a great job. I think the legislature is driving you crazy, but I just think you're doing a great job, and Brian certainly understands the issues. He's worked with them for a very long time. So welcome, Brian, as commissioner.
Thank you.
Be happy to welcome you. Okay, and also Carrie with Duke Energy. I'm not going to pronounce your last name again. I'm just going to butcher it. Carrie is replacing Angelique Collier, who left the board and was also, I think, with Duke. So now it's not going to be Ryan. It's, what is it, Kevin?
Yes, it's Kevin.
Okay, yeah, Kevin is going to go over the procedure for handling testimony and so forth.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Bump. I'm representing IDEM's Media and Communication Services today. We will be taking questions and comments from the public at today's meeting when the public is called upon. For those members of the public in the meeting room in person today, please be sure to complete a speaker card if you would like to speak. Speaker cards are located on the table at the entrance and should be given to Carla Kendrick when completed. Carla, raise your hand. Yep. For those joining us via Zoom, if you would like to speak, please utilize the raise hand or chat feature in order to be recognized. To access the raise hand and chat feature, at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your device, you'll see a menu bar, and you may have to move your mouse or touch your screen for the menu bar to pop up. In the middle of that menu bar, there's a chat icon, which you can click on to show the chat dialog. You should also see the raised hand option. Please utilize the raise hand or chat features if you have any questions or comments, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. For those joining us by phone, if you have a question or comment, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. When called upon, you'll need to unmute your phone by pressing *6. For everyone in today's meeting, please identify yourself when speaking. If any members of the media have joined us via Zoom, please utilize the chat feature or email media@idem.in.gov if you have any questions. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website. With that, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Chairwoman Gardner.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. Our first order of business today is to approve the summary of the minutes from the November 10th, 2021 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as distributed? If not, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. This is Ted Nemick.
Is there a second?
Ken Rulon, second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 This is just a voice vote. Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the minutes are approved unanimously. Now we go to item reports, and the first report will be from Commissioner Rockensuse.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for being here, either in person or virtually. I've been on the job now in this role almost 2 months, and it's quite the whirlwind. I would not advocate for taking on this kind of a job walking into a legislative session. But it's been good. We're doing good work. Our metrics are still we're really doing well in our permits metric and our compliance metric. Just a reminder, we want to get our permits done within 75% of timeframes. I believe we're at, on average, 60% of timeframes across the agency. Our compliance metric, we set that in motion a couple of years ago. We wanted 7 days. We're averaging 4.3 days. So we're really doing well on our core metrics. Coming into this role, I started thinking, what projects or initiatives do I want to take on that may be already in the works or a little different from what Bruno was focusing on. I have 5 of them. One of which is lead contamination. So there's a number of sites around the state that are dealing with lead contamination in some way or another. And some of them don't fall within an IDEM or EPA program. And so I'm really trying to work with our folks here at IDEM and then leveraging some EPA resources and people to figure out how we can clean up these sites so that people aren't living within lead contamination. And so that's one that I've been working pretty closely with since I took over. Solid waste is another topic. You may be hearing about solid waste from the legislature, and if you'd like, I can cover that bill in a minute. There is a bill, it's called 1226. It's Representative Speedy's bill, but I started trying to tackle solid waste prior to the legislature starting. And so the issue I found is that we have a legitimate use approval and we have a solid waste processing permit. And that's about the only options you have if you're wanting to deal with any kind of recycling activity, whether that's steel or plastics or whatever it is that you want to reuse. Those are the 2 options. And the solid waste processing permit is pretty involved, and it has a heavy permit fee attached to it. And so many of these smaller companies that are getting into this world and have great ideas simply aren't able to do so, or they don't even know that they need a permit until we show up at their door. And so I have tasked a group of individuals internally, and then we've created an external group led by Bruce Palin and Cal Davidson to start looking at what kind of regulatory scheme can we create to allow people to be innovative and reuse and recycle material without having to get some massive permit that frankly, much of that permit may not apply to what they're actually doing. So that is ongoing. That might be affected by the bill, so we'll see how that ends up. Environmental justice has been a major issue that all states are trying to tackle. It was a priority of the Biden administration as they came in office. And so we're really trying to figure out what does that mean, each state is, and how do we address the concerns of environmental justice. Many states are being thrown into Title VI lawsuits, the Civil Rights Act lawsuits, for the fact that people are living in areas and it's against their civil rights to be living in an area that's not the same condition as somebody else in another area. And so we're all trying to grapple with, how do we do this? How does this affect our permitting? Do we try to attack environmental justice issues through compliance and enforcement? And so we're working really closely with EPA to figure that out and figure out the next how to go down this road. We do have a site in East Chicago who received a letter asking the agency to do environmental assessment. What does the air, land, and water look like in that area? And so we are working towards figuring out how to do that environmental assessment by using existing data. And we're going to start doing some community outreach to see what is it that is actually bothering them. Maybe it's not pollution at all. Maybe it's something else. And how can we help them get to where they want to go? Two more things quickly. There's our Office of Air Quality. We're relooking at our fee structure. 2 years ago, this board passed fees. I think we increased the fees 27%, and it was about $2 million. That took our funding from 9 million to 11 million. Today, that funding's back down to 9 million. And it's because the Office of Air Quality's fee structure is based on emissions. And the state has done a pretty good job of reducing emissions. So now we have less money to run our program, even though we need the same amount of money to run the program, regardless of the emission level. So we are looking at different ways that should be structured to move away from emission-based fees so that we don't have to continually trying to find money to fund the program. And then finally, this is a really cool opportunity for the state. IDEM and Department of Homeland Security teamed up, and we have a program where we will start collecting PFAS foam from fire stations. And each agency found some money. It is an item on the governor's agenda, and the RFP is out on the street right now. And we will be hopefully by March collecting this foam from fire stations around the state. So that was a really cool thing. It started under Bruno, but I was happy to continue it because it's a really good opportunity. And with that, that's kind of my update. Happy to take any questions, happy to talk about the legislation if you'd like me to. I am trying to, wean off the legislative side of things, but as some of you know, on this call or in the room, that's harder to do than it seems. So, but I have good staff and they're taking care of me, so.
Commissioner, I have a question. In reading some of the bills that were being considered in the first half, and I don't know what's happened to them, but there seemed to be kind of a movement with some people to address rulemaking by agencies with just basically saying you can't do it. Are any of those bills moving that would restrict rulemaking?
Yes.
And I actually had some conversations with a few legislators who happened to be on a couple of these bills. And I was pretty astounded to find out that they didn't realize that each agency basically had a different process for doing rules. They had no idea that with items, realistically, the agency doesn't do the rule. It's the rulemaking board, which is appointed by the governor, that does the rule. DNR is different than IDEM and different from all of the other agencies. So a lot of homework hadn't been done on rulemaking, but they want you not to be able to do it. What's happening?
So that is, the bill you're referring to is House Bill 1100. That passed out of the House 61-29, so it kind of went party lines. The sponsors in the Senate are Chris Garton, Mark Messmer, and Blake Dorio. And I don't know what's going to happen in the Senate with that bill. I do know that the author is now becoming aware that the process that the Environmental Rules Board goes through is unlike any other in the state. And it's laid out in Title 13, not in Title 4. So hopefully, I mean, from an administrative standpoint, the whole administration's against this bill. From an item standpoint, if there's some way to remove this board and our process from this bill, that would be great. But because it affects every single agency, it is being handled by the governor's office. And some of the items in the bill, just for everybody's information, it changes the sunset from 7 years to 4 years, which for the Environmental Rules Board would be really tough. You guys would have to meet all the time, or at least a lot more than we currently do, because it takes so long for the rules to get to the point in which you're adopting them. So we would get done with a rule if it's quick in 18 months, and then literally a year later have to start doing that rulemaking process again for that same rule. There's some Attorney General overview in the bill. There is a complete no more stringent than. So currently in law, IDEM can do, or the board can pass a no more stringent rule, but it has to sit in front of the legislature for a session, and then they can act on it if they want to. This would just outright ban anything more stringent than, even if it was the right thing to do for the state. I think there's one more piece to it, but all of which, a lot of these things we already do, and we already are, in a sense, heavily regulated with our rulemaking. And I don't think that many people, like you said, Chairman, know that we are.
No, I don't think they do at all. And I think it could be argued by somebody that at the way it is now, we wouldn't fall under the rule because the agency doesn't make the rule. It's the board that makes the rule.
That's
So
right.
I would think that there could be a good argument that it wouldn't affect us. But anyway, this has concerned me a lot. Thank you. Any other questions for the commissioner?
Yeah, Chairman Guard, this is Ken Rulin. Brian, I was just wondering with the air quality, how much of the shortfall in funding is recovered if we just take out the 3 down months of 2020? You know, if we get back to normal levels, you mentioned we were a couple million short. Is that caused by the shutdown, or has that already been accounted for in your presentation? Thank you.
Ken, that's already been accounted for, and then we did see some reduction, but not enough to have the impact that we're seeing. A lot of the impact is frankly from power plants shutting down and moving to natural gas. Our SO2 emissions went down, and Matt Stuckey would be able to give you a better number, but close to 90-something%. It was a huge drop because they're shutting down the coal units. So as more industries move that way, which isn't a horrible thing for our air quality, but it does impact us. And we haven't really figured out yet what that new way is going to look like. We're starting to have those conversations now. And so as we get to a point in which we have some options, we'll certainly cue you guys in and get feedback from everybody. And I forgot to introduce my new chief of staff. She's on the call as well. Her name's Parvani Stover. She previously, prior to working here with me at IDEM, she worked at Department of Corrections, the Attorney General's Office, and Department of Child Services, a number of different capacities, a lot of legislative experience. She has a lot of great state experience and know-how in navigating government. And so she was a phenomenal pick for me, and I'm happy she's here keeping me in check.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Chris Peterson with the rulemaking report.
Good afternoon. I'm Chris Peterson in the Rules Development Branch of the Office of Legal Counsel. We do not have a tentative date scheduled for the next board meeting. While we do have several rules that are in process right now, we don't have any that look like they're going to be likely to be at a point where they can be presented to the board within the next few months. So we're going to be keeping an eye on the rules, and when we start getting rules that look like they're ready to be presented, then we'll make a recommendation about an upcoming board date. So that is my report, but I'd be happy to answer any other questions about rulemaking.
Okay, Chris, there's a kind of an echo, I think, because you're in such a big room with not many people. So you did say that the normal board meeting, may not be necessary?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions of Chris? Okay, thank you, Chris. Today we have hearings on the following board actions: adoption of state SO2 and Porter County ozone designations, final adoption of satellite manure storage structure reference updates, public water system definition, water program permitting fees, and waste program permitting fees. We will also have the following non-rule presentations: a non-rule policy document on guidance to predicting a high ozone level day for sources subject to 326 IAC 8-13, the 2022 list of impaired waters and consolidated assessment and listing methodology under section 303D of the Clean Water Act, an update on the citizens petition to request rulemaking on the 2012 EPA recreational water quality criteria. As a reminder, if you wish to testify in any of today's hearings, please fill out a comment card and give it to Carla Kendrick at the sign-in table if you're in the big room. If you are attending via Zoom, please let Ryan know if you wish to testify at any of the hearings. The rules being considered at today's meeting were included in the board packets and are available for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel, 13th floor, Government Center North. The entire board packet is also available on IDEM's website 1 week prior to each board meeting. A written transcript of today's meeting will be made. The transcript and any legal submissions will be open for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel. A copy of the transcript will be posted on the rules page of the agency website when it becomes available. Will the official reporter for the cause please stand, raise your right hand and state your name?
Lindy Meyer.
Do you solemnly affirm that you will keep complete and true notes of all the transcripts that transpires and prepare a transcript thereof and faithfully perform all duties imposed upon you as an official reporter of the state of Indiana?
Yes.
Thank you so much. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning the adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IAC 1-4 regarding sulfur dioxide designations for most of the state and 326 IAC 1-4-65 regarding the designations for Porter County for ozone. I will now introduce Exhibit A, the draft rule, into the record of the hearing. Kayleen Walsh will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Keelan Walsh with the Rules Development Section of the Office of Legal Counsel, and I'm here to present rule number 21-515, state sulfur dioxide and Porter County ozone designations for your consideration. This rulemaking updates the attainment designation statuses for 90 of Indiana's 92 counties for SO2 to accurately reflect the federal language used in the Code of Federal Regulations at 40 CFR 81.315. This rulemaking also updates the designation status of Porter County under the 2015 8-hour ozone max based on the final rule published by US EPA in the Federal Register on June 14, 2021. In order to avoid conflict with ongoing litigation concerning a challenge to the designation status for several townships in Huntington County, the rule language for that county differs from what's currently reflected in 40 CFR 81.315 and will be updated if necessary once the challenge is resolved. Davies and Pike counties were omitted from this rulemaking and were included in the final rule that was adopted at the November 10, 2021 board meeting, which amended the attainment designation status for the 2010 1-hour primary max for SO2 for townships in both counties. The separate rule was initiated to ensure the timely update of the 2010 attainment status for those two counties, and also included the updates for both the primary 1-hour SO2 standard and the 1971 secondary 3-hour SO2 standards from this rulemaking to avoid confusion and any potential crossover errors between the two rules. The updates to the attainment designation status for the 90 Indiana counties contained in this rulemaking are a direct adoption of federal requirements and will have no fiscal impact for the state or sources beyond what's already imposed by federal law. This rule will ensure that state rules are consistent with federal standards, and therefore I will request that the board finally adopt this rule as presented. And I'm available to answer any further questions you may have. Thank you.
Does anyone have a question for Kayleen? Are there any speaker cards?
I do have a question, Chair Guard.
Yes, go ahead.
It's Joanne Alexandrovich. Can you briefly tell us the nature of the litigation regarding Huntington County?
I cannot know. I didn't get that information prior to the meeting, but I am happy to see if I can find that information out from program staff or our legal attorneys and further send that on to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we will move on. The hearing is concluded. The board will now consider adoption of amendments to 326 IAC 1-4 state SO2 and Porter County ozone designations. Is there any more board discussion? I need a motion to adopt the rules as presented.
So
Alexandrovich,
moved, Bill Etzler.
seconded, Alexandrovich.
Okay, thank you. This is a roll call vote. Mr. Chambers? Mr. Chambers? Dr. Nemec?
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich?
Yes,
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler? Mr. Schuler? Mr. Rulon?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bortner?
Yes.
Mr. Waskey?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Etler?
Yes.
Ms. Karowski?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. The motion is passed 11 to 0. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IAC 20 satellite manure storage structures. I will now introduce Exhibit B, the preliminarily adopted rule with items suggested changes into the record of the hearing. Crystal Hackney will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Crystal Hackney, and I'm a rule writer in the Rules Development section within the Office of Legal Counsel. This rule was preliminarily adopted by the board on May 12, 2021, and final adopted on November 10th, 2021. However, it was recalled during the promulgation process due to an administrative error in the rulemaking process because the fiscal impact analysis documents were not sent to the Legislative Council at the same time that they were sent to OMB. Once the rule was recalled, we resent the fiscal impact analysis documents to OMB, copying the Legislative Council, and have already received an updated approval letter. This rulemaking updates certain references throughout the satellite manure storage structure rule at 327 IAC 20 for the United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Services, conservation practice standards for consistency with the requirements found in the confined feeding operations rule at 327 IAC 19. The alignment of these two rules will eliminate confusion for interested parties and provide consistency in the design and construction of future manure storage structures. Aligning the SMSS rule with the CFO rule by updating these references will ensure that future regulated sources are held to the same standards for the same activities across state rules. The only change to the rule language after it was final adopted in November 2021 is a correction to the reference date in the updated NRCS Conservation Practice Standard Code 634 at 327 IAC 20-5-5D. Other than that one change, the rule language has not changed since it was first final adopted. Item requests that the board final adopt this rule as presented. I am available to answer any further questions that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, are there any speaker cards on this?
No, ma'am.
Does anyone have a question? Okay, the hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IAC 20 satellite manure storage structures. Any further board discussion? Is there a motion to adopt items suggested changes?
Rulon, so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion. Chris Horn.
Okay, this is a roll call vote. Mr. Chambers, Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Woski,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Etzler,
Yes.
Ms. Karowski,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. Actually, there is 12-0. I have a question before we move on. Mr. Schuler, I heard you this time, but I didn't hear you on the previous vote. Did you vote on the previous vote? Mr. Schuler,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yes.
Did you?
I was
did you
yes
vote?
on the last. I was yes on the last vote as well.
Okay, well,
Yes.
that, if you voted on the first vote, if you voted aye, that is a vote of 12-0. So,
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay, now we need a motion to final adopt the rules as amended. Is there a motion?
So moved, Bill Etzler.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Chris Horn.
Okay, call the roll. Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Woski,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Etzler,
Aye.
Ms. Kowalski,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. Again, the rule is adopted 12-0. Okay. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption amendments to rules at 327 IAC 8-1-3, 327 IAC 8-2-1, 327 IAC 8-2.5-2, 327 IAC 8-3.4-1, 327 IAC 8-4.1-1, and 327 IAC 8-10-1 regarding public water system definition. I'll now introduce Exhibit C. The rule is preliminarily adopted with items suggested changes into the record of the hearing. Mary Ann Stevens will present the rule.
Good
Mary Ann?
afternoon. Hello? Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Mary Ann Stevens, a rule writer in the Office of Legal Counsel, Rules Development Branch. This rulemaking is in response to the US EPA finding that the state's definition of public water system
is not consistent with the federal definition. To correct this inconsistency, the state's definition of a public water system needs to add the words, quote, "an average of," end quote, before, quote, "at least 25 individuals," end quote, to all definitions of public water system in Article 8 of Title 327, in order to be as stringent as the federal definition. Additionally, a definition of public water system is being added to 327 IEC 8-3.4-1 subdivision 24 to include it and the variations that occur in rule language such as public water supply system, and the acronyms for these terms, and connect them to the definition of public water system at 327 IEC 8-2-1 subdivision 74. Similarly, additions have been made to the definitions of community water system and non-community water system to include variations of the terms used in rule language plus the acronyms for those terms. This rulemaking also is amending the rule language at 327 IEC 8-2.5 2B2 by adding the term GAC 10 before enhanced coagulation. This is another US EPA requested clarification to make it clear that GAC 10 treatment, which refers to 10 minutes of contact time in granular activated carbon filter beds, applies to enhanced coagulation as well as enhanced softening. These wording additions will cause no implementation change for drinking water systems because for years IDEM has been determining whether a drinking water system is or is not a public water system according to the federal definition, and applying the requirement that GAC 10 treatment applies to both enhanced coagulation and enhanced softening. Since preliminary adoption, there has been just one change to the proposed rule language, which occurs in the definition of pesticide review board at 327 IEC 8-4.1-8 subdivision 18 to cite the Indiana code reference more specifically for the pesticide review board. IDEM's drinking water programs are delegated to the state from US EPA, which gives the federal agency authority to require IDEM to make these rule language changes so that IDEM can maintain primacy for the programs. Therefore, IDEM believes the requirements of US EPA have been met in this rulemaking, and we ask for the board's vote for final adoption. If there are any questions, I can provide answers as well as IDEM staff members from the Office of Water Quality who can provide more detailed answers.
Thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
No, ma'am.
Does anyone on the board have a question? Anyone watching virtually have a question? This hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IAC 8-1-3, 327 IAC 8-2-1, 327 IAC 8-2.5-2, 327 IAC 8-3.4-1, 327 IAC 8-4.1-1, and 327 IAC 8-10-1 regarding public water system definition. Any further discussion? I need a motion to adopt IDEM suggested changes.
So moved, Davidson.
Is there a second?
Second, Rulon.
Okay, this is a call the roll. Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Essler,
Aye.
Ms. Koryaski, and the chair votes aye. The motion is adopted 12-0. I need a motion to final adopt the rule as amended.
So moved, Davidson.
There's a second? This is a roll call vote.
I didn't hear a second.
Pardon me?
I didn't hear a second.
Is there a second? Who seconded it?
Bill did, but I will as well if you didn't hear Bill.
Okay. Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey.
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Etzler,
Aye.
Ms. Kurowski,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. The motion is adopted 12-0. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IAC 3-5-5, 327 IAC 5-3-2, 327 IAC 5-21-3, 327 IAC 8-3-7, 327 IAC 15-16-5, 327 IAC 15-16-10, and 327 IAC 19-7-1, and the addition of 327 IAC 5-3-17, 327 IAC 5-21-12, and 327 IAC 19-9-2 regarding water program permitting fees. I will now introduce Exhibit D. The rule is preliminarily adopted with items suggested changes into the record of the hearing. Mary Ann Stevens will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I am Mary Ann Stevens, a rule writer in the Office of Legal Counsel Rules Development Branch. This rulemaking to increase permitting fees for items water program is conducted under the authority of Public Law 250-2019, which was passed by the 2019 General Assembly to amend the process in IC 13-16 concerning the adoption of environmental fees by the Environmental Rules Board. In addition to the revisions to IC 13-16 that allow for future rulemakings to increase environmental fees by not more than 10% in a 5-year time period. Public Law 250-2019 requires the Environmental Rules Board to adopt rules once before January 1st, 2022, a date now extended to January 1st, 2023, to increase the amount of the fees for water-related programs under IC 13-1810, IC 13-1820, and IC 13-18-20.5, regarding confined feeding operations, MPDS permits, and public water systems respectively. Increased water program fees, along with increased fees for solid waste and hazardous waste programs under IC 13-20-21 and IC 13-22-12, are limited to an aggregate increase of $3.2 million, more than the aggregate fee revenue actually received in the year immediately preceding the proposed fee increases. Water program fee increases will result in increased revenue for items water programs of approximately $1,490,110. After the fees are established in rules, corresponding fees will be removed from statute. Since preliminary adoption, there have been a few minor rule language revisions at 327 IC 5-3-17A2 that were suggested by the Indiana Register staff, and revisions at 327 IC 19-7-1A3 to cite 2 Indiana Administrative Code references more specifically. For some time, the collective water program program fees have not been sufficient to cover items cost of operating the water program. The fees associated with issuing permits, amendments, modification, or renewals have not changed since 1996 for NPDES permits, 2003 for public water system permits, and 1997 for confined feeding operation permits. The fees increased under this rulemaking will help IDEM's water program. Therefore, we ask for the board's vote for final adoption. If there are any questions, I can provide answers as well as other IDEM staff members who are here today. Thank you.
Are there any speaker cards?
No, ma'am.
Are there any questions from anyone else? This hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IEC 3-5-5, 327 IEC 5-3-2, 327 IEC 5-21-3, 327 IEC 8-3-7, 327 IEC 15-16-5, 327 IEC 15-16-10, and 327 IEC 19-7-1, and the addition of 327 IEC 5-3-17, 327 IEC 15-21-12, and 327 IEC 19-9-2 regarding water program permitting fees. Is there any further board discussion? Let's see. You'll have to bear with me. I think my papers are mixed up.
While you're finding that, Beverly, I'll just throw in for Brian that I hope he appreciates that we're helping him keep the lights on.
Right. Okay. What happened is my printer printed this out and 2 pages stuck together, which I am sorry. Well, I think at this point, I ask for a motion to adopt the final adoption of the water program permitting fees rule.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I could assist, this is Nancy King with the Office of Legal Counsel. Where we are within the program would be that you would ask for a motion to adopt IDEM suggested changes. And if it would be beneficial, I can read the roll for you.
Nancy, you echoed.
Oh, great. Well, I'm not very helpful then. Right now, we need a motion to adopt IDEM suggested changes. Are you
Okay.
able to do that?
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt items accepted changes to the
So
rule?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Bill Etzler.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Woski,
Yes.
Mr. Davison,
Yes.
Mr. Etzler,
Aye.
Ms. Koryaski,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. The motion is adopted 12-0. Now I need a motion for final adoption of the amended rule.
Move Davidson.
Is there a second?
Bill Etzler, second.
Okay. This is also a roll call vote. Dr. Nemec? Dr. Alexandrovich?
This is
Yes.
Nemec. Aye.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Rulon?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Bortner?
Yes.
Ms. Woski? Mr.
Yes.
Woski? Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Etzler? Mr. Etzler?
Aye.
Ms. Kuriowski?
Yes.
The chair votes aye. The motion is adopted 12-0. Final adoption of the rule is amended. Okay. Okay, this is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption. Is that, Nancy, is that the same one I've already done?
No, ma'am, this is the final adoption of the waste program permitting fees.
Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. My printer had a couple of pages stuck together and it didn't print a half page of a couple of pages. This is the public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning final adoption of amendments to rules at 329 IAC 3-1-1-14-.1, 329 IAC 10-14-1, 329 IAC 15-3-4, and 329 IAC 15-4-3, addition of 329 IAC 10-11-8, and 329 IAC 11-9-4.1, and repeal of 329 IAC 15-3-7 regarding waste program permitting fees. I'll now introduce Exhibit E, the preliminarily adopted rule, into the record of the hearing. Seth Engdahl will present the rule.
Members of the board, good afternoon. My name is Seth Engdahl, and I'm a rule writer with the Items Office of Legal Counsel. The rule currently under consideration for final adoption would increase fees related to the administration of items solid waste and hazardous waste programs. This rulemaking is statutorily required by Public Law 250-2019, which was described a few moments ago for the water fee increase rule. This rulemaking only relates to the fees associated with items solid waste and hazardous waste programs. The fee increases included in this rule are anticipated to provide approximately $1,715,595 in additional revenue for the administration of these programs. These fees have not been raised since 1996. The proposed fee amounts contained in this rule were determined based on an analysis of current fee revenue and permitted related costs incurred by item. Therefore, this rule is not only necessary for fulfilling the statutory requirement put forth by the General Assembly in Public Law 250-2019, but also essential to maintain items' fiscal integrity and its ability to conduct the permit issuance work that it is tasked to do. Item requests that the board approve this rule as presented, and I and other item staff are available to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for Seth? Any speaker cards? This hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to rules at 329 IAC 3.1-1-14.1, 329 IAC 10-14-1, 329 IAC 15-3-4, and 329 IAC 15-4-3, addition of 329 IAC 10-11-1, and 329 IAC 11-9-4.1, and repeal of 329 IAC 15-3-7 regarding waste program permitting fees. Is there more discussion?
Sure, this is Calvin Davidson. Just a couple of brief comments. I had, after the first action on this last fall, I was kind of surprised that we didn't get much input, and reached out to some fellow stakeholders in the regulated community. I want to just encourage, I guess, on other matters too, because education seems to be an area that could improve, because there are people that want to have input but don't understand quite how this board works. To your point earlier regarding 1100, House Bill 1100, a better education of what we do and how we do it allows us to do a better job, allows us to make the things work the way you want them to work. So if you don't come to us, you don't make suggestions, you don't have input, we're doing the best we can with the knowledge we're presenting. And at the same time, I'd ask a question of the agency. Does this open a door for us to take on if someone comes back next fall or this summer with an innovative rate fee structure implement idea that allows everybody to get along? Is this a door into the future, or are we restricted to what we passed today?
Nancy, that's probably a question for you.
Well, and here I am, right here, ready to answer it. Thank you, Cal, for the question. I believe that, as you know, this is the first time that we have been able to do our fees by rule since many years ago, when I first started 30 years ago, where our fees were removed because of a lawsuit, and it was the water and waste fees that were. At that time, in order to fund the agency, there was a task force put together by the legislature, and they came up with a fee structure that was put in statute. That was supposed to be a temporary fee structure. However, it remained in statute until the bill was passed in 2019 that gave us, they never eliminated the ability for the board to do fees by rule, which was the original intent when this agency was created. So we used that avenue to move forward with this process. At that point in time, the agency had an audit done that was a cost of service audit, explaining what it costs to run these various programs. That was the basis for these fee increases. But as it was also needed a legislative approval to do that, there were some restrictions put in that, as Marianne alluded to, that we're not allowed to do it more than once every 5 years, and it can't be more than 10%. But beyond that, because this is a rulemaking structure, I think we do have the ability to look at different and more innovative ways to possibly charge fees, perhaps for people to be able to pay them maybe in several installments. Now, the problem that we have related to that, and it's certainly something to talk through as people come up with these ideas, is that we have to maintain a budget. It has to be approved by Office of Management Budget and all that good stuff. But that said, I think that we have much more leeway in terms of the ability to think of ways to make this work for people, and certainly to educate people on what this looks like. This being the first time we've talked about it now it started almost 25 years with our rulemaking process. We're now 27 years. But I do think that we have that ability. And if, as people bring us these kinds of ideas, if it would appear that we might need some kind of specific statutory amendment to allow us to do that, I think that's certainly something that we would entertain and work with the legislature to make sure that happens. Because obviously it's the people whose permit fees are allowing us to be funded to do the jobs that we're required to do. They have the interest and they should be involved in this process. So I appreciate the thought, and I believe that we in the future would have that ability, and I hope that we're able to have those conversations.
Nancy, wasn't that work group, and then this was passed in what, 93, 94? The fees, is that?
It was, yeah, it was, I want to say 90, I can't remember. It was, yeah, O'Bannon was leading it. It was a group after the American Maize case came out and we lost our fees. They put together a legislative group to look at the cost of service And there was a separate cost of service study done at that time, which was presented to the legislature, and they came up with the fee structure. That is the one that that we've worked with for water and waste at the time. Also, at the time, we were working on bringing in the Title V air program, and there was separate rulemaking going on for that. As it was not subject to the lawsuit at the time, we didn't have to include that within this concept of the water and waste fees. So that all three now, we do have some constraints under the Clean Air Act. And as Brian mentioned, we are looking at ways to address the fee issues as they relate to air. But all of these are now going to be rulemaking processes. So it does allow us a little more, I would say, latitude, possibly in looking at different ways to do it than if we are within a legislative structure.
Well, it seems to me that it has always worked better and you get a better result if the fees are adopted by a rule. You know, inherently legislators, and I'm sure I was guilty of this as well, you don't want to raise fees ever on anybody. And I think the rulemaking process allows a more neutral area to deal with it, and getting a cost of service analysis is really important, I think. So we'll see eventually how this comes out in the legislature too, and it could change a lot. So with that, any more questions? So the hearing is concluded. The board will now consider final adoption of amendments to rules at 329 IAC 3.1-1 14.1, 329 IAC 10-14-1, 329 IAC 15-3-4, 329 IAC 15-4-3, 329 IAC 10-11-8, and 329 AAC 11-9-4.1, and repeal of 329 IAC 15-3-7 regarding waste program permitting fees. Any further board discussion? Need a motion to final adopt the rule as presented.
So moved, David.
Is there a second? Okay, this is a call the roll. Dr.
Second.
Who was that seconded?
Bill Etzler will second.
Okay, Bill Etzler. Dr. Nemec,
Aye.
Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Wartner,
Yes.
Mr. Waskey, Mr. Davidson, Mr. Etzler. Mr.
Mr.
Etzler,
Etzler, aye.
Ms. Koryaski,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. The rule is adopted 12-0. Okay. We now have a presentation on a non-rule policy document by Mark Durf of Items Office of Air Quality regarding guidance to predicting a high ozone level day for sources subject to 326 IAC 8-13.
Good afternoon, board. My name is Mark Durf. I'm a section chief for the technical support and modeling section for the Office of Air Quality. One of my section responsibilities is to issue daily air quality forecasts throughout the state. When when weather conditions warrant, typically in the late spring and summer, Office of Air quality forecasters may issue an air quality action day for any of the 7 air quality forecast regions throughout the state. This is done when ozone is anticipated to exceed the national ambient air quality standards of 70 parts per billion over an 8-hour average period. Ozone concentrations exceeding the standard equated to an air quality index or an AQI range of unhealthy for sensitive groups, or even worse air quality can be unhealthy, very unhealthy, or hazardous levels of concern. Non-rule policy AIR-0020-R1-NPD applies to center plants at integrated steel mills in Lake and Porter counties in northwest Indiana. There are currently 3 center plants in Lake and Porter counties. Center plants convert iron-bearing raw materials from a fine particulate size to a coarse agglomerate using heat. The heating process drives off volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, from the material. VOCs and nitrates of nitrogen, or NOx emissions, are key components to the formation of ozone. Sources must comply with limiting their VOC emissions to reduce their emissions on days when air quality action days are issued. The rule citation for affected sources is 326 Indiana Administrative Code 8-13-4B8. The NPD provides guidance for a source to develop its own high ozone action day prediction procedure if the source does not wish to rely on IDEM's air quality forecast of an air quality action day. This policy document spells out the steps a source must take to develop its own air quality forecast. Details of those steps are contained within the document, and this also includes the primary meteorological conditions generally present on high ozone days in northwest Indiana, and the proper notification of IDEM for use of the source's alternative high ozone prediction method. To date, IDEM has never been notified of any sources that use this alternative high ozone forecasting, and no sources have challenged the air quality action day forecast issued in the area since the rule was adopted in 1998. Historically, the number of air quality action days issued for Lake and Porter and the Port counties in the northwest Indiana region total less than 10 days a year, with the exception of the summer of 2012, when it was extremely warm, when we had over 2,000 air quality action days issued. Local and regional VOC and NOx emission reductions over the past 2 decades have helped to reduce ozone in the northwest Indiana region and throughout the state, thus limiting the need for issuing air quality action days. This is true despite the fact that the ozone national ambient air quality standard has been lowered several times over the past couple of decades. OAQ recommends sources rely on IDEM's air quality forecast. These forecasts are updated daily and are available on IDEM's SmogWatch webpage, as well as through email notification that individuals or services can sign up through the SmogWatch website. In the event that a source would prefer to use their own air quality forecast, OAQ's air quality forecasters would work with that source within the parameters set within this NPD to ensure all precautions were taken to forecast high ozone as accurately as possible and protect air quality for Indiana citizens. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now have a presentation by Paul McMurray of the Office of Water Quality on the 2022 list of impaired waters and consolidated assessment and listing methodology under section 303D of the Clean Water Act. Paul?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Paul McMurray, and I am the integrated report coordinator for IDEM for the Office of Water Quality in the Watershed Assessment and Planning branch. Can everybody see that now?
Okay,
Yes, that makes sense.
yeah, it's up.
Okay. So section 305B of the Clean Water Act requires states to produce a report during even numbered years on the current condition of state water quality resources. Section 303D of the Clean Water Act is a list of those waters that have been sampled and refined to be not supporting designated uses, and these waters are being considered impaired. So for the 305B report and the 303D list, items looking at all of our water quality data that we have, and also looking at outside sources as well. So the finalized 305B report and 303D list are due to EPA on April 1st of 2022. But prior to that, we have a public comment period. And it's a 45-day comment period that started on January 14th and will go through February 28th. And during this time, the draft 303D list and a notice of comment document, which is kind of a summary of the full report and the consolidated assessment and listing methodology document, which is just a document that contains a summary of methods used to assess things. Those are all put onto the IDEM website for public to review and to submit any comments. At the same time, these documents are sent to EPA, so during this review period, EPA is also looking at the list, and once the review period is over, they will send some questions that they may have on it. So the 303D list is actually just one part of Indiana's consolidated list, which is basically a summary of everything IDEM knows about water quality in Indiana surface waters. So, excuse me, on this list, we place every water body into one of 5 main categories for each of its designated uses. And the designated uses that we assess for are aquatic life use support, recreational use support, drinking water use support, and fish consumption. So each water body can be assessed for each of these 4 different uses. So category 1 are it's basically a water body that has been assessed for all 4 uses, and all 4 uses are fully supported. Category 2, if a use has been assessed on the water body, that use is fully supported, and no other uses are impaired. Category 3 is for uses where we don't have enough data or information to determine if that use is supported. Maybe we've never sampled that stream or lake for fish tissue or whatever the use is. Categories 5 and 4 actually have a little bit more detail of those. So category 5 is is for stream segments that have an impaired designated use. So these segments we've sampled them. We found that say the ecological community of fish or aquatic insects is not meeting our standards, and so it's impaired for that use. A stream segment can be considered category 5 for one use, but then say category 2 for a different use. If it's passing, it's that's a fish consumption or something. So basically, category 5 is the 303D list for Indiana. It's just the list of all the impaired water bodies. Category 4 is for water bodies that are impaired, but have either had a TMDL written for them. TMDL is a total maximum daily load document. So that's either been written for that water body and submitted to EPA, or the impairments are something that you really can't address with a TMDL. So if it's, we determine that the fish community is probably being impaired because of poor habitat, that's not something that you can really fix, like beaver dam or something like that. Then it might be considered a category 4 site. Slide, please. So for the past 3 cycles, beginning in 2018, the Indiana 305B report and the 303B list have been uploaded to EPA assessment, MDL tracking, and implementation system, also known as THINGS. So THINGS is an online database that we send all the data to, and it's organized and it's available to the public for them to, to review if they would like to, and if they're curious about water quality in a certain stream segment. So in this year, we have uploaded the draft components of the integrated report and the 303D list to THINGS, and they are currently reviewing it right now. The data in THINGS is also used in products such as EPA's House My Waterway site, which will allow citizens to search, any site in the U.S. Put in their address, city, or river, and it will show a map with the different stream segments that are impaired or not impaired. To click on that, as you can see what the impairment is, and if the TDL has been created for that impairment. So that's just one way that IDEM's water quality data is being used. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at the current status of Indiana waters on the draft 303D list. Currently, there are 4,303 individual water bodies, that is either stream reaches or lakes, that are impaired for one of the designated uses of this one. Altogether, there are 6,522 impairments. So there's quite a few water bodies that have more than one impairment. Breakdown between streams and lakes, there are almost 4,200 stream reaches that are impaired out of about 15,000 in the state. And that's equivalent to about almost 21,000 miles of stream miles in Indiana, about 1/3 of all the miles in the state. With lakes, there are 136 lakes that are impaired for a designated use out of 1,555, and that's equivalent to about 43% of all the lake acres in the state. The total for lakes is not including Lake Michigan, but the stream total is including the lake shore of Lake Michigan. Next slide, please. So the top causes of stream impairment, the primary greatest cause of impairment is E. coli in water, which affects almost 12,000 stream miles in Indiana. And this is followed by biological integrity, which is just poor fish or aquatic insect communities. With regards to fish tissue consumption, PCBs, and PCBs account for about 10 times as many impairments as mercury in fish tissue. And these different impairment causes, there can be multiples of these for any given stream segment. So you have a stream segment that has impaired biological integrity and impaired dissolved oxygen in the same segment. So compared to the 2020 list, there's really not any major changes, but we are going in the right direction. There were 69 fewer impairments and 92 fewer water bodies impaired in 2022 compared to 2020. And 104 prior impairments on 91 streams were found to actually have water quality improvements. And some of the remaining changes to the list were the result of interesting QC, looking for errors in the data in the list, and continuing to develop DLs, which will address some of the category 5. One change that we are making in the consolidated assessment and listed methodology document is how we are looking at total dissolved metals in our samples. So we're looking at developing these diversion formulas for certain metals: arsenic, chromium, copper, lead, nickel, and zinc. And the idea is that if we have a site that we sample for total metals only, not dissolved, we use these conversion formulas to get a good estimate of what the dissolved metal concentration might be. And if it appears that the dissolved metal concentration would result in an impairment, then we can go back again to that site and sample it for dissolved metals this time to see if there actually is an impairment. And hopefully this will result in fewer overall additions to the DOT list. So the key takeaways is that there's really not major changes in the number or types of impairments that I am seeing. Things seem to be getting a little bit better gradually. Currently, we have 3,038 MDLs approved for impaired waters in the state, and we are monitoring about 250 to 300 sites per year, which provide us with additional information on water quality. If you would like to find more information about the 305B report and the 303B list, this link, or just Google IDEM 305B report, and it'll take you to the website where the draft 303B list and its comment documents are.
Okay. Are you going to leave that up or you want to take it down? There we go. Thank you. That was interesting. I assume those slides will be on the recorded recording of this meeting, correct?
Yes, they will be.
Okay, good. Any questions for Paul? I do have one question. How long does it take for you all to get around to all the water bodies that have to be assessed?
It's on the project that we're doing with our probabilistic monitoring strategy. We have we have to say divide it up into 9 large basins, and we sample these basins every year. So with that project, it takes about 9 years to cover the entire state. Within each basin, we're looking at between 38 and 40 sites. Some of these sites are randomly sampled, so they give us a statistical estimation of the water quality for the entire basin based on sample design. But then you have other projects that are more targeted in nature, where we're going to say a watershed that has been previously sampled before, and we can kind of target sites at, say, bridge crossings. And that gives us, it's much smaller scale project, but it gives us maybe a bit more detail about certain stressors that are affecting the watershed.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. Now we're going to have an update on the citizens petition, Paul Higginbotham for IDEM and Craig Williams for petitioners. And then I think Bill Essler has comments as well. So Paul, do you go ahead and go first?
Thank you, Chairwoman Dart, and good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Paul Higginbotham. I'm the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Water Quality at IDEM. And I would just like to take this opportunity to give you an update, as you mentioned, that with the working with the petitioners as it relates to the 2012 criteria. It's kind of evolved somewhat from that as well. And we had our last meeting with petitioners groups on January 11th, at which time, in my opinion, we had a very good conversation with them about the approach of working with one of their communities to develop kind of a focused sustainability analysis approach that would then allow them to pursue the wet weather limited use subcategory rulemaking, which would be in line with our current statutes, as well as in line with what EPA has approved for CWA authority / citizen / Indianapolis, and that the board has recently approved for the city of Fort Wayne. So we're hoping to continue down that path of working with them towards what that means by utilizing existing information and data that's out there to try to save. One, I think the concerns from the petitioners is the cost, especially so much for some of the smaller communities, mid-sized communities, the cost of going out and getting additional information in those activities. So we're taking this approach now that the petitioners group has taken the next, it's been 4 to 6 weeks to gather up some data and some information that already exists. And then after that, they're going to come back. We're going to schedule another meeting to then kind of talk through that process and how to utilize that data to meet the requirements for use sustainability analysis, which would then lead to a wet weather limited use subcategory rulemaking, which would then lead to a level of regulatory certainty for what they're looking for as well. So that's our update from my end at this point. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Anyone have questions? Okay, Craig Williams for the petitioners.
Good afternoon, board. Thank you for the opportunity to just provide a little bit of update. Really, I don't have anything additional to add to what Paul shared. We are continuing to, I think, work well with the work group. Looking forward to running a test community through the proposed focused UAA to see if this is something that will work for Indiana communities. I do want to acknowledge in the audience, I know it can be probably sort of hard to see remotely, Mayor David Wood with Mishawaka and Mayor Richard Hickman of Angola are in attendance today. I wanted to make their presence known or to see that they're continuing with their interest in this process. So thank you.
So you really feel this has been beneficial and you all have a better understanding of the statute and the meaning of it, and you really think it's been beneficial?
We have been very encouraged with the progress that both sides have been able to make. Petitioners still feel that very strongly about the path that we laid out and provided for the agency. We do see a good possibility of this focused UAA to be a working solution, and are actively trying to help make that successful.
Well, and thanks for putting the time in on this. Bill Etzler, would you like to give your perspective? Bill's been involved with this since the beginning.
Thank you, Chairman Guard. The one thing that I've been encouraged about is I think the petitioners and the agency were a long way apart when we started this process. And I think through a lot of healthy dialogue, exchange of ideas, and a lot of hard work on the part of both parties, I think we found a potential solution to finding a way for small communities to save a significant amount of money, and to also reach a point where they can be less concerned about what might happen during wet weather discharge to those communities, and what effect that might have on their discharge permits and potential fines and all of those sorts of things. I know that when we started down this path, I think there was little recognition on either side of the position that the other party had. And I see us now in a place where both parties understand that through a little give and take and a lot of hard work that we can achieve the goals of both parties and come to a solution. It's still going to take a little bit of time and effort, but I think we found a way to make this work. And I look forward to working with them as we continue down this path.
No, thank you, Bill, and thank you for your participation and the time you spent on this. Does anyone have a question for Bill or either of the two previous presenters?
Yes, Chair Guard, this is Joanne. I do have a question.
Mhm.
And I guess Bill can answer it or anyone can answer it. If this latest compromise or workaround or however you want to characterize it, I'm sorry for a lack of better terminology, do you foresee that it might require a rulemaking?
I'll answer it from my perspective. Probably no rulemaking because with the path that we're looking at now, the rules are already in place, either through statute or through rules that the board has adopted. And I think it's just a matter of taking all of the information and just simplifying the process to achieve what we need to achieve.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Bill. Guess now we're down to the area of open forum. Does anyone wish to address the board today? Any of you on virtually or in person? Okay, as you heard earlier, there isn't a specific date for the next board meeting, but as soon as there is one, we will let you know. It very likely won't be at the time that we normally have it, probably be later in the summer. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. This is Nemec.
Okay, is there a second?
Second, Rulon.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Hearing none, we are adjourned and thank all of you for your participation. This was, I think, one of the best turnouts that we've had for a very long time. So thank you all.